These are good examples of still lives, and I tried to keep them pretty simple so that they have an obvious relationship to our simple box constructed still lives at home. So this is the first one. So some things that you can see that are going really well. This is constructed the same way that we did our still life. They started with the 4x4, and then we would add one box at a time in class, and everyone would draw it all together, kind of building the still life as we go along from floor to ceiling. So you can see that they've carried through all of their lines. Look at all the process lines, all those lines kind of helping them find where things are meeting and lining up or not lining up. Those lines show the history of the drawing or process, so that's a good thing. And notice how those lines are a lot lighter than the lines of the actual object. So you don't want your process lines to be so loud that they overpower the lines that show what you're actually drawing. So look at how sometimes the lines trail off a little bit within the boxes. Look at that larger box, how some of those lines kind of trail off a little bit. It's very sensitively drawn. This is a very vertical composition, so the verticals are drawn very strongly. Notice how you can see at least two sides to all of those boxes, right? Remember, there's no perfectly horizontal lines if you can see two sides to a box. So all of those boxes are made up of verticals and diagonals. The artist has also paid attention to their eye level. So you can see that you can look down upon that small box in the bottom right, and you have to look up at that top box on top of the cylinder, right? So you do that by taking note of where your eye level is. It was probably right here where that box, the top of that box ends. It's probably around where their eye level was, because you can see that line is almost perfectly horizontal, but it has a little bit of a bend to it in the left and the right. So be conscious of your eye level and look down at anything below it. Look up at anything above it, obviously. For the second one, pretty similar, right? We're seeing a lot of process lines going around, very good. It's fainter than the lines that actually construct the objects. You can see that this person is using these little points to kind of find corners of objects. It's a lot easier to move a point than a part, right? We don't draw in parts. So use the points, those little tiny places where they've stung the paper with their pencil, to kind of mark where you think something might be or the corner of a box might be. And then if you're wrong, you can always move it. It's a lot easier than drawing a box 3 times because you got it wrong the first 2 times. It's a lot easier to erase a little tiny point than it is to redraw the whole box. And it's a part of your process. So you can see the 4x4 and how they've used vertical and horizontal lines passing through it to find the angle of the diagonal lines. You can also see their eye level, how they can look down at the large box on the bottom, and how you can't see the tops of the boxes towards the top of the composition. Here is an older drawing. Very simple, right? It's just a few tables stacked on top of each other. So this is the same way that you would draw just simple boxes that you would find at home. And notice that a tabletop, or finding how the legs are spaced of a table, it's the same principle as drawing that 4x4 in perspective. It's all like a flat rectangular or square shape, right? So any kind of surface, any flat surface, treat it the same way you would treat the 4x4. Yet again, eye level is very obvious in this one because we can see up into the bottom of that table towards the top. This example shows how this student drew in the beginning of the semester, before instruction, and then how they drew after some instruction. So on the left, this is how they drew the first day of class. Look at that drawing, right? Nothing in there is structurally sound. Imagine trying to sit on that stool or like place a glass on that table. It would fall off, right? It makes no visual sense. Everything looks really soft and strange. Now, that same person a few weeks later drew the drawing on the right. They've used vertical and horizontal lines to ask questions. They've used their red pencil and their black pencil. You can see that even though they used some horizontal lines to try to find the composition, the verticals are more important, right? This is a very vertical composition. We want the verticals to be louder than the horizontals, because if the horizontals are louder than the verticals, your drawing is going to flatten out. We're comparing heights here. There's some contour going on as well. This is very similar to anything that you can do at home, just stacking some boxes, very simple. Okay, this one's a much more complex still life, but it's drawn the same way. Look at the 4x4. There's a little stage on top of the 4x4. It's like just duplicating a 4x4 and kind of placing it on top of it, similar to how we placed our rectangles on top of our 4x4s. They've used vertical and horizontal lines to find the placement of everything on their page. They've set limits. You can see limits around most of the composition. Very good. This is our last example. This shows what we call a turnaround drawing. Yet again, it's a before and after of how the student drew before they had instruction on the left and how they drew a few weeks later after instruction on the right. So it looks like two totally different people drew this, right? Look at the tabletop on the left. Really soft and crooked, out of perspective. It's like a mushy table. It doesn't describe the structural integrity of a table at all. Now, the same student on the right is using horizontal and vertical information to draw everything in perspective. Boxes, tables, even the contour elements. They have used their red pencil to find the amount of space the contour would take up if it was in a box, right? That's a great way to find the location of information, right? Use straight lines, vertical and horizontal, to ask questions about placement. Great examples.